cannot do direct revolution, but the only way to lay the foundation for it is to do what you are doing to move the underground. It's a theoretically correct title.
Theory Underground exists to cultivate the conditions necessary for a working-class intellectual renaissance that goes beyond old political categories or other identitarian niches. At TU, autodidact workers with earbuds and professionals who see no future in existing institutions or movements are able to challenge their doxa and develop an understanding of the situation we are in.
If you subscribe at theoryunderground.com, you'll get access to a package of courses, including my Intro to Fault Line Theory, which includes Intro to Nick Land and Intro to Slavoj Žižek. These courses are being woven with the 3 courses that take place on a month-to-month basis, spread out throughout the year of 2025. Those courses are 12 Core Concepts and the Fundamental Problems with the Situation Today with social theorist David McKerracher, 12 Essential Political Thinkers with political theorist Benjamin Studebaker, and The Philosophy of Nature with philosopher Nina Power.
The way these all get woven together at a deeper and more meta level is through the ongoing research seminars led by David McKerracher, Benjamin Studebaker, and Michael Downs, where they engage with one another's
We cannot do that.
All along, Theory Underground was going to make this huge difference. Those are the people that are like Nance, who were on the sidelines at one point and then said, nah, I'm going to get in. I'm going to roll up my sleeves and I'm going to go hard. And then there's another kind of person, a person who waits in the wings, collects receipts, and who will say in 10 years, oh yeah, I was there. I saw that happen. And then they'll gossip monger. Listen, if you want to get involved, get involved. But if you're going to sit there in the bleachers, well, here's some popcorn.
We cannot do direct.
All right. We're done with the phone call that I was just on. And what's up, everybody? It's Why Us, Dave and Nance, coming to you live from Phoenix, Arizona. I've never been here during this time of the year. Guess what? It's actually real nice. I thought this place would be like hell, but actually it's beautiful, and they've got a bunch of different kinds of nature. I thought it was all one kind, and they actually have a bunch of different kinds, and so I'm learning all kinds of things and hopefully growing as a result. But we are joined today by a special guest. That's right. It's Daniel Garner of OG Rose. Welcome, Daniel. How's it going, man?
I'm doing wonderful. I'm doing freaking fantastic. The weather's nice here in Virginia too, so it's all good. And it's been nice ever since, y'all were here. So your spirit has actually greened the forest. All the grass that was dead has come back. So your presence has done a lot. So it was great.
Well, we also brought the whirlwind with us.
Well, so it was the whirlwind didn't come with us. The sky gods, the spirits in the sky, they kind of congealed, and everything had been at this sort of equilibrium. I'd like to think a slowly degenerating equilibrium that was kind of hanging over the house, even though the house was fine, but the sky was all just kind of there. And then we, in coming, they got all upset. They whirled around. They literally picked up the Garner's barn roof and they hucked it like a frisbee, but because they were like kind of spazzing out, they didn't even get it very far. They tried to make it hit the propane tank, but it didn't, and ever since then things have been even better than ever.
We forced the issue.
Yeah,
it tried to stop your appearance, and then when you got here the weather was great, so they gave up, you overcame. So victory, Razanok, it all happened. So so again, the barn incident will forever go down in history as the day the TU arrived and overcame the divine weather forces. So thank you, gentlemen.
I know I'm going to see some theory fiction that's about this soon. Whoa, Michelle's in the chat. What's up, Michelle? Great to see you.
Hey, what's up?
So is
Hi, Michelle. Hi, hon.
So is Dib Membrane. Great to have you, Dib. And to everybody else who's showing up, Nance started a poll that said, yo, you smashed the like button yet? And he only gave you two answers. Real simple. He's not being cute. Yes or no, motherfucker? That's what he asked.
Shout out to the
Yes or no?
reporter that said no. Shout out. Thanks for being honest.
Yeah.
Do us a favor and hit it now, dude.
Yeah, we only have 7 people watching, and we're only going to have 7 people watching if we don't get some people smashing that like button. It's almost like when YouTube sees the like button get clicked, what YouTube is thinking is, oh, that person just said that they would that hey, I'll watch this. I'd watch this. Like, this is something I'd watch. And then because YouTube is totalizing and simplistic, it goes, oh, well, if you like it, there's all these other people that are just like you. Let's show it to them. And then they show up and then they talk and you go, these people are nothing like me. And YouTube's like, well, from our point of view, you're all the same.
Do your shirt brothers and sisters a favor by liking
All the same.
the video.
Yeah, do the shirt brother hookup, as we say.
Yeah, shirt brother hookup.
Yeah. So we just got out of a session, and it was the second of these that we've had this week. We had one yesterday. And so basically the first one, the one yesterday, was with my class, Sociology 122 at Boise State University. And I'm probably not allowed to even say that, but you know, at this point, it is what it is. We're doing, because we found out at University of New Mexico, we weren't allowed to say their name while we're doing something in their quad. There was like this big thing. You're not allowed to say the name. You're not allowed to show the trademark. You're not, it's all like very private. And so then we were interviewing Dr. Ian Thompson. That will probably go live tomorrow. I'll be premiering it. It's a fantastic conversation. Excellent conversation. And in it, he and Anne keep going back to making fun of UNM for trying to be all proprietary about, like, you can't even talk about how you're on their campus if you're making public content when it's a public university.
They thought they're Fight Club. You're not Fight Club. You're UNM.
Yeah. The first rule of UNM, you can't talk about UNM.
Yeah. Well, and Ian did kept telling everyone that he is a professor at UNM, but he didn't say where we were.
Yeah, yeah. He was like, I can't say where we are, but I'm a professor at UNM. And we were like, yes. And we were in New Mexico, in Albuquerque, at a public university. So it's interesting that universities are in the midst of a crisis of legitimacy, opting for a complete sort of severance with the public in their own quads. The one place that at least some of these places designate as a free speech zone, which is
We got harangued.
We got
For
harangued.
having amplified sound, for having a sun canopy, for not being permitted,
For not having a fire hydrant.
fire extinguisher.
Yeah.
I had to go buy a fire extinguisher.
Did I say hydrant? Yeah, an extinguisher. Thank you.
Yeah. It was absurd, Daniel.
Yeah, so that's a little update on where we just were and kind of some of the stuff that we were doing, and it just kind of ties in because we've been doing a lot of these experimental events, and you know, I like to get weird and do what I can to just flip the table, literally or figuratively, with my students. And so what we did the last week was, well, it was spring break for them, and so we did some events in Virginia with Daniel, and then the students who joined us yesterday were joining to talk about the episode we did in the Agora that was called Conversation versus Communication. And then today, it was the Soc 101 students joining to talk about what? We were talking about tragic sociology versus paranoid sociology. And a big theme from today was, what is science? What is scientism? The scientific attitude. Of course, this is when Daniel brought in Kuhn and Popper and Firebend, which was awesome. And then yesterday, though, we talked about conversation versus communication. A lot of this stuff from before. We talked about joint attention. We talked about critical media theory, solitude and solicitude, structural stultification. And I stuck up for communication. I defended it because at the end of the day, though we prefer conversation and there's something special, soft and squishy, nonlinear, and more human about what we're calling conversation, there's also the importance of communication in certain situations. Okay, this is all stuff that you get access to if you're a subscriber. We're not going to beat a dead horse with any of it. I kind of wanted to focus more on the form of yesterday's conversation and the form of today's conversation. And so I'll let Nance kind of take the wheel here and talk a little bit about media experiments we've been doing with Zoom and the real world. And then Daniel can talk a little bit about what it's like to get yeeted from room to room with a bunch of students he's never met, but who've met him through a podcast episode.
Yeah, I mean, we've been trying to use Zoom to have conversations rather than just create content that looks like communication that we put out on the internet. But you can't do it that easily. It's quite difficult to actually use the technologies that exist to loop people actually into what's going on, to have a conversation. So we've tried a lot of stuff where we have a virtual call, we have virtual audience, virtual participants, and we're also in meet space. And it's a tough nut to crack. It's a tough egg to hatch or whatever.
It's weird to have your meat sack right beside me.
Yeah. But no, I mean, we have traveled the world multiple times at this point doing this, using the internet to have conversations with people in real life. Last week, we were just in Virginia at the beautiful home of OG Rose. And we did some Proto-Agora events. We didn't have the live stream going, but we did have the Zoom call. So we had virtual participants / audience and embodied meatbag participants and audience. And we're doing this virtual reality, real virtuality thing. It's interesting. I do believe most of the people who partake and think about things find it interesting. This satisfies something that you can't get on YouTube. And you definitely don't get on a Zoom meeting or a Microsoft Teams meeting or whatever when you're at work. Or trying to go to school or whatever, or doing a video call with your family because that's how you keep in touch. We're trying to break the medium, but also our relation to the medium and also your relation to the medium, dear reader, dear viewer. No, you can't be a comfortable bystander. You're not an innocent victim. You're implicated. We're bringing you along with us. Necessarily. So welcome to the party. And Daniel has been so gracious to participate in our experiments with us.
Yeah, so what were those experiments? We basically created a bunch of breakout rooms, divided the students up between those breakout rooms. And then the way I was thinking about it is I like to try to spread the students who are very talkative out across the different rooms. And then I like to also the students who are most engaged or most interested in reading the books, or spread them out as well, and then try to spread out the TU people who might be participating, spread them out as well. And so Daniel's in one room, Nance is in another room, Alex is in another room. We got this whole I'm trying to spread the TU people, and then what I'm doing, because I'm the recording side, is I'm talking to everybody and it's all on the record, right? But everything happening in the other breakout rooms is off the record, except in the versions where we've actually recorded the breakout rooms and then we fit it all together in one giant episode, which is cool that you can do that. It's not always necessary. And I think that what we're doing here is a nice little short circuit for that, because I can pop in on the room where Daniel is, catch the tail end of what he's saying, and then yeet him into the room I was just in. Bye, Daniel. And he rolls out. And then I get to kind of be like, okay, everybody, so what was he talking about? And what did you guys talk about before that? And what kind of got to go? And then everyone gets to sit there and kind of go over it again, ask questions about it. And then I might say some things. And then I'm like, oh, okay, well, now I'm going to yeet myself out of here and I'll move Nance back into here after I go. So then I jump into Nance's place. I hear what Nance is talking about, catch the tail end of it, and then I throw him out into the other room. And then I'm retroactively picking up on everything that happened in that space before I showed up. And I just keep doing that as I keep throwing myself into these new rooms and then retroactively figuring out what's been going on here. And then at the end of it, we all meet back in the sort of general assembly and have some closing remarks. I think it's fun. Yeah, I think it's cool. This was one of the cooler purely online things that we've done. Of course, it's not purely online for them. It does change reality to see me in Nance's room because they've seen Nance in Nance's room from the college classroom. They've seen Nance in Nance's room just through Zoom. They've seen it, if they've ever checked out the channel, they've seen it on stream. And so then seeing me in here, I know it's just weird. It's kind of like when they see us all together at an IRL event and they know that the intention of everything we're doing is this sort of ever virtually present thing. We are coming to a city near you, and we might just come flying out of your YouTube or TV right into an actual space in your city. And so it's like this whole like attitude that you could just compartmentalize your life from the internet and that these people are just this channel and it's all just a podcast and you have that relation to it. We're trying to break that. And in breaking that, I think we've managed to weed out a lot of the people that I was meeting prior to certain filters that got implemented, certain filters that have been put on the operation. And one of those is sort of this dredge thing that we're doing. The dredge being the idea that we don't just dredge the internet with the M-stews and pull everybody in the theory scene into conversation. No, we follow it up by coming to that city near you. One of the kinds of people that we've weeded out in doing that is the people who just talk at me obsessively without any awareness about other people in the situation, or how awkward that is for my wife. That's just one example. There's a lot of other examples, but people like Daniel, people like Michelle, people like Nance are capable of sitting and having a conversation with me and other people and not treating someone like Anne like a third wheel or like just the wife, when she's obviously not those things. She is a wife, but she's not, she's definitely my wife, but she's not just a wife, right? And she's not just the woman in the conversation. There's a weird fucking thing going on there. And part of it is just what gets referred to as parasociality. I think it could also be a sort of diarrhea of symbolic exchange or an attempt at symbolic exchange, but it's not doing it correctly. And so diarrhea being the opposite of constipation. So when all information has been coming from Theory Underground to you through your podcast or whatever, you've been like just playing it all through your earbud for years and years and years. It's all Dave and co talking to you. You never get a chance to talk back, not really. And now that you're meeting me in real life, it's like, oh, it's my turn. And then it's like, bah, 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 bah. But the weird part though is that other people are involved and they matter a lot. And also our vibe that day, maybe we're really tired, maybe we're really energized, maybe there's something that put us off about something that happened that day or whatever it is. The point is like there's a wavelength with the tour crew. And a part of the thing about meeting people in real life is figuring out like, oh, what's their attunement? How can I get my attunement to kind of meet them in the middle? And if not meet them in the middle, actually mirror, maybe even mirror in an opposite way. David Ruiz did this, I think, in Kansas City, meaning like when things were really stressful, he was very peaceful and he was just there ready to help if necessary, but he wasn't like annoying, desperate, trying to get attention or being like, here, how can I help? No, he was just ready if needed and attentive, like involved, right, as a participant. And so we've, through the touring, learned there are different things that we can do to try to attract or repel different kinds of audience dynamics. And really one of the most important is just getting together in the meet space because these things sort themselves out over time. And if you don't do it, well, there's a bunch of stuff that's just going to come in. It's almost like certain breakdowns that need to occur in relationships so that you can actually learn how to navigate that human being for real, get delayed and deferred It's difference with an ounce. Gets delayed and deferred for sometimes 10 or 20 years. And you're like, oh, this is my best friend. And then you ignore your family because you have this best friend hands reach away. And this person is perfect compared to your family, but it's perfect in a hyper sense, right? It's not real. It's not real. You're only getting a side of them. It's like a shadow of them or a projection of them. Yeah.
Profiles.
All right. That's my opening CMT pilled preamble that I'm hoping will open the space here. And Daniel's been just listening this whole time. So let's give him the floor for a bit. But yeah, what do you think about all this form, content, the whole thing, all this stuff from the last couple of weeks here, Daniel?
Well, magnificent, always a treat. And I agree with what you just said at the end is extremely important. So if we accept the premise from, say, a William Ong, that literally the introduction of the written word transforms subjectivity, that after the written word, the scientific treatise is possible, for example, or as the great Lunkar talks about, writing, creating this flexibility of memory, then the subject, if you just grant me that language, is formed by the medium condition, as I like to talk about, a play on the material condition, but talk about the medium condition. Like, there's good reason to think if something changes human subjectivity, if there is something, it is a medium condition more than, say, just information. I think often we have the idea that once you're educated, there's obviously truth to the idea that when people are educated, they can participate in the democracy, or they're able to, say, make a future for themselves, and so on and so forth. But the issue becomes, there is a difference between a change in the subject versus just educating the subject, as an example. And if we are in an age where the trajectory of, say, education or making something of your potential is leading somewhere we don't want to go, oh, those are great. Dang it, I don't have glasses. I'm sure I have something now. I'll just wear this handkerchief. There we go.
Perfect. Yes,
like if we, so what we need is I look like actually, oh, wow, it's like, oh, this looks great. I need to get a little basket of daisies to carry around or something like that. There we go. Solidarity. We have solidarity now.
I'm here with you. Yes.
We are all together. This really works out. So it really means the world, gentlemen. Thank you so much. If I could have made a flower appear like a magic trick, that would have been cool. But alas, I was too slow. But on the idea of the medium condition, like what really does seem to historically change how humans are human are medium conditions. Not merely education. Now, education may give you the information needed to invent a new medium or to invent a new information technology, but it is not the same as a qualitative, as I like to do that play, on experience, right? So if we're looking at the world and we're like, humans are being, they're losing their focus. They're losing their humanity. They're manipulated instead of convivial. We seem to be heading toward, to allude to Mikey's tremendous recent publication on this, the capital Lovecraft Kukula, that is, we're heading toward from the future or whatever. I never say that right. And you say, there it is, bam, there it is. The Cthulhu Lovecraft, very nice. And if you're heading toward that, and you're like
Cthulhu. I just realized what you're talking about. Cthulhu. Watch
out! Don't get on a ship. So if you're like, I don't like that, well, then you really need to think medium condition, not merely education. Or like, for example, if I tell you, hey, don't lose focus. Hey, don't let AI replace your humanity. If I educate you on the dangers of AI, that's not going to do anything, because one being, it's a habitus. It's a way of being that makes you toward this replacement of human beings. And what history seems to show us is ways that you change modes of being are tied to medium conditions. So if there's something about content creation that is leading to all sorts of trouble, you have two options. You say, okay, well, let's just get rid of content. Let's just get rid of YouTube. Let's get rid of the internet. Well, that's one strategy. That might be that's not my strategy, but you can understand why people take that position, right? Because you go, okay, if you look at what's on offer in the medium, you say all of this is just leading to manipulation versus conviviality, to reference Ivan Illich, then it makes sense where you would go, well, let's just not do it at all. Well, what if, though, there was new ways of using the medium that actually enhanced humanity in ways that could not be enhanced without the technology of the Zoom and the YouTube and these things together, right? What if that possibility is out there? Well, if we knew it, we would have already done it. So we have to experiment to find it. And we have to make a lot of tinkering and mistakes to get to the place where it can arise. And that requires doing the work that Theory Underground is doing, right? You have to tinker with medium conditions. Like we sometimes get when we look at the history of invention, there's a whole lot of friggin' tinkering. You don't usually just come out straight and invent the new thing. You do a whole lot of mistakes and experiments and trying to do things that then seem like they didn't happen once you get the finished product. But in the process, they are precisely the steps of arising to something, well, new. That actually has a very important role. And for me, the idea of working against the parasocial, trying to, what I see, what we're doing here, this very important work is, well, I talk about it all the time, is social coordination. Like, how do we use this technology to allow possibilities of coordination that have not been possible and that you could argue without which basically we cannot habituate ourselves to be human beings who are able to not be overtaken by the habits of capital that lead to reductionism and losses of time energy and losses of being able to think in a dynamic way that makes us more human, right? We haven't had those options, right? And when you're talking like, so like when I see, like, for example, the ability to bring a class together and to move people between the rooms so quickly fights the tendency of over-identifying the ideas with the speaker and helps the ideas have a life of their own, right? It makes the speaker a guide, but not, you could almost say, a master, right? Well, how do you in a non-digital setting have that fluidity of emotion of a person who's speaking without it being really weird? Like in an like if you were in a physical room and you said, okay, it's been 5, you need to come out, and you go to the next room, the amount of time it would take to do that would be 8 minutes, and it wouldn't really work, right? But we've always had a problem in thinking of over-identifying with the teacher as a master, big other, like we've always had that problem, right? Well, if you have this way of flipping and moving and then coming in, one, it feels alive and playful. Two, you're helping the ideas be the ideas have a life of their own because the conversation can continue after people meet. And what seems to be so important to, well, a new form of the human is not over-identifying with, say, a master, but actually participating in maybe the ideas the person said that then you can make your own and participate in. Well, those are matters of design. Those are matters of creating spaces where those mechanisms are at play, right? I can't say, if I simply say to you, hey, don't get a big other or whatever, don't be neurotic, or if I say to you, don't end up psychotic or whatever, right? Well, no one intends to. I've never met anyone that says, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to over-identify with the professor and ignore the ideas. No one does it. The problem is the experience of the classroom itself leads you into that neurotic structure. That could be problematic, or it leads you into those problematic identifications, right? Well, new designs, new ways of doing spaces can work against those subconscious associations. And if a lot of our trouble, if you grant it, has to do more with subconscious associations that people have that are leading them toward being manipulated, a loss of focus or things like that, then you have to work on the level of those associations. You do that in the medium condition. You do that in the design, not in information. Now that, of course, like we were saying, this doesn't mean information is bad. This doesn't mean communication is bad. This doesn't mean, it's always a bothness that we have to work with, right? But if we have identified a problem in the very way the human is toward the world, qualitatively, then this is a medium problem. This is an architectural problem. This is a design matter. And the way that the design will work is it's going to almost by necessity have some sort of bridging of the online and the in-person. It seems like it must, because otherwise it's going to be too domain specific. Like if it's just geographical, if it's just in the meat space, then I cannot coordinate relations between Europe, America, all around the world, people who have 5 minutes between work, you know, the coordination problem becomes much more limited. But if I have the digital, I can reach a whole lot of people, but it brings the temptation of just doing the digital because of the ease and falling into an audience, right? How do I use the digital to coordinate the meat space to enhance the digital, and to bring it into the space of the real? That's the medium condition that, like the invention of printing and writing, could qualitatively change people to actually then make us in service of the extension of humanity versus our replacement, and perhaps realize, to close, the possibility of that world that Mikey was mentioning at his book launch, where we see what a world is like where everyone has their time energy. We've never seen that. We don't know what is possible if that were to occur. And a big factor, I think, in making that possible is new ways of social coordination that uses the digital for the enhancement of the meat space and the meat space for the enhancement of the digital, that is working toward ways of collective intelligence and collective social interaction that might actually show us what humans are actually capable of, to take a stand for the human, that if we do not try and we do not give ourselves over to, we will by default give victory to the techno Cthulhu. I think I got it that time. And Lovecraft will be our fate, I suppose. So I think it's all wonderful work.
Yeah, man. The Luddites, they're a misunderstood group from history. I think they're a misrepresented group from history. The Luddites were never trying to cancel machines or cancel mechanization or automation or industrialization. They were aware that they were being used by the machines, by the technology, and they were being operationalized by capital. So they smashed up the machines in order to take back their freedom, not just for the sake of smashing up the machines.
And that's why Nance is working on a Cyber Luddite manifesto, baby. But it's not just working on but you've also released some notes towards that, right?
Yeah.
So everybody should check out your Substack on that. But yeah, so the Cyber Ludditism approach, right? This is where you say, oh, we're amusing ourselves to death. Oh, we're all being turned into ADHD autists. Oh, there's something going on here that's making it very hard for people to relate to one another outside of the commodity form and what seems like a sort of consumer narcissism. Oh, I don't like these things. Right. This is why Daniel said the tendency, the knee-jerk immediate reaction is burn it down. Well, accelerate the decline or what have you. Of course, decline might not work the way Spengler thought. In cyber history, it just might not, it just might not. We don't know. And so we have to think about changing the media conditions. The medium is the message. And what that really means is that these technologies mediate our experience, and that insofar as a technology is mediating our experience, our perception, our interpretation, our relations, our interactions, at that point, it's not just a technology. There is the medium side of the technology. The technology, just seen in a strictly engineering sense, that's just a technology. It just helps us to do something. Yeah, but the medium side is like, how does that mediate experience? And the point is we went from analog to during that time, we were mediating experience through writing prior to that speech, right? And then, of course, the printing press made it so a lot more people were becoming bookish and able to sort of imagine themselves as part of much bigger communities that were mostly held together through print, newspapers and such. And that was because of the printing press and which is, McLuhan calls it the Gutenberg Revolution. Right. But what happened, and this was what McLuhan was, thinking about, is the electrification of our central nervous systems and all these new media forms that come with electricity. But now we're in the digital age. Cyber history started in 1992. That's when Nance and I first met at the age of 42 and 43 and a half. You'll find out all about this in a piece that we are releasing soon. That's right. It's on its way. There's a lot of secrets that will be revealed. But basically, the media conditions are what need to be changed. But we find ourselves always already in the middle of them. It's a hermeneutic circle, meaning it's interpretation all the way down. It's representation and mediation all the way down. So what do we do when we can't extract ourselves from it? When we can't burn it all down? When we can't go to a before time? Or when we can't go up to a sort of God's eye perspective or a neutral, objective kind of position from which to think about well, and this is where Heidegger says, if there is no leaving the hermeneutic circle, then we can get to a better position within it and come up with a method for dealing with that fact. And so there are people who act like they are able to exit the hermeneutic circle and they're not doing interpretation anymore. What they are doing is just stating facts, or
Ontotheology.
They're ontotheologizing, as Ian Thompson will talk about in our conversation with him. Or you can do what we do with the critical media theory cohort at Theory Underground, and that is harness and counter tendencies. Harnessing and countering tendencies is, if you kind of go with the charioteer analogy that Plato uses, like reins, right? When you've got reins, you've got this creature, let's say a horse, pulling your chariot, and it's just got, and maybe you've got two horses, and those two horses kind of have their own interests. You got, the horse of the passions versus the horse of the appetites, right? And so, the good charioteer is rationally trying to work with those two tendencies, right? But they are two different tendencies, or maybe they're myriad tendencies embodied in these two creatures. And so the point of the reins is to harness all of that power, all of that interest, all of that energy, all of the special talents in those creatures, to harness them. But you're also countering certain tendencies, right? For instance, the tendency to get distracted and then run down to the river, or run away from the dog, or what have you. And so, whoa, we've got an Alex Appington popping in here on stream. What's up, man? Good to have you. How you doing, man?
I'm decompressing from math homework, and but I'm doing all right besides that.
Nice. Well, I'm mid tirade, so I'll finish it out before we bring it back around here. So for right now, I'll just say, what am I doing? What am I saying? I'm saying harnessing versus countering the tendencies of the medium is step one for actually changing the media conditions. And for that, we need new designs. But those new designs will not come without a theory or a set of theories that help us understand those tendencies in the first place. And that's really what we're getting at with the situation. I think the word situation gives people the idea that it's a thing, like an object, right? Like, oh, the situation, as opposed to a set of processes in movement that are dynamic, right? So there might be cybernetic flows, and there could also be dialectical flows, and there could also be other kind of flows that have other kind of fancy words that theorists haven't even come up with, because we don't even understand how things work at that level. It's possible. We don't know. That's why we need system theory. That's why we need Baudrillard. That's why we need Bourdieu, Heidegger, all these thinkers, Lacan, Marx, all the way down. And so we want to talk about real virtuality and the things that we're doing to kind of change those media conditions. But I also kind of want to say, yeah, that's what we are doing on the back end. We don't have to do too much of that here on the front end. It's really just the answer to why us, like, what are we doing here at Theory Underground? And what kind of conversations have we been having on the back end with Daniel and everyone else? And so that's kind of what we wanted to touch on. The other thing, though, is this panel at Platypus next week. The interesting thing about it is, how do you talk about the medium to people who are primarily sort of ensconced in the world of Marxist literature, but they haven't taken McLuhan seriously? Because in our experience, a lot of the time, they don't get it. They just don't get it. And they don't get it because, like, when you explain it, they go, oh, yeah. And then everything they say that follows is like, oh, but you didn't actually process any of what we're saying. I mean, in a sort of sense, to drive the point home, to be extreme, and maybe we have to be a little extreme here, you got to say something like, maybe, we're a different species now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Every media revolution means we're a different species now. If you have a lizard and then a little later it's flying, and it wasn't a flying lizard before, now it's a flying lizard. It's like, okay, your species is now different, is it not? Assuming this is not all in the same life cycle. If it was all the same life cycle, I guess it could be like a butterfly lizard thing. Who knows? It's possible. But what we're trying to think about here is how if there was all of a sudden some kind of human that was running around with a tail and it was swinging from trees, we'd be like, well, it's a human, but it's that kind of human with a tail. kind of a different
humanity.
species. It's a different species now. Yeah.
It's a human Z.
That's a human Z right there, is what we would say, of course. So the point is we are a different species now. Cyber Ludditism, as I understand it, is about coming to terms with that and trying to do something about it.
Well, and embracing it, harnessing it, saying, so be it, we find ourselves already here. Are we going to cry over spilled milk, or are we going to try to become human? Because yes, we're something new, but also the human is this kind of futural thing that I boldly said. The human species does not yet exist. Now, that might be sensational. I don't want to be taken as reactionary, but I will stand on that. Humanity itself is a thing in our future. Something that we can belong to, that we hopefully will belong to, and that we already do belong to just by nature of who we are and what we are. And yes, of course, we're human. Yes, of course, the dignity of life. But we are so much more than what we've ever been allowed to be, thanks to material conditions. And I believe that we are all beautiful, and we should continue to be beautiful. One thing about these Marxists who don't take the medium seriously, Marxism as a medium, mediums being these things where there is an interface, where there is chocolate and peanut butter that get mixed up. So there's emergent changes that happen on both sides of the divide. The fact that they don't understand that means they've been changed by Marxism as a big other in a way that they can't even recognize and kind of comprehend. So I do believe that reductionist Marxism will always necessarily fail. That's another hot take, right?
Yeah, and I guess the way to turn it back into a question for you, Daniel, because I know you've got stuff you'll say anyway, no matter what. You're kind of a plug and play guest. It's nice. I don't really have to say anything. I could just say, okay, Daniel, go. But I do want to tie it into one thing. Also, shout out, we don't just have Michelle Garner in the chat. We also have Ann Snellgrove McKerracher in the chat saying greetings from the grocery store. Awesome. Also, by the way, Alex, I know you're driving right now. I turned your camera off just so I could keep the layout that I have without having to change it. But also, we're going to be hopefully meeting up with Alex either today or tomorrow. And so we're going to go figure that out after this stream is over, which it's going to be a historically short stream for us. But the thing I kind of want to drill in on here, and it's the question for you, Daniel. So yeah, it's not just like super reductionist people. It is also that, but there are also just like very, very smart, very critical and intelligent people at Platypus. They're coming from all over the world. I'm going to be a part of a panel that has no competition. There's no breakout rooms. It's everyone for an international conference. All eyes on me for 12 minutes. And then I'm having a conversation with an old leftist defender, which would be Doug and he called McLuhan just a bourgeois thinker when we were on a panel with him in Portland, right? So, and then we've got Bill Ayers, someone who thinks that everything from the Weather Underground that he, was the founder of until today in American activism is great and glorious and is just like a positive. It's all positive. He's someone who could really benefit maybe from understanding hypostition, right? Because so much of the stuff that Ayers was involved in or currently condones either is a form of hypostition, this kind of self-fulfilling prophecy that actually is the opposite. It's just like undermining everything that you're intending to do. But the thing is so Bill Ayers as the sort of representative of the new left, Doug Lane as a sort of representative of the old left, as well as a guy named Alex Higgins, who I know nothing about. But it's a distinguished lineup, and it's kind of crazy they want to have me there. I'm kind of afraid it's going to be like the Red Wedding, in Game of Thrones, and not to spoil anything, but it's going to be like this big ambush or whatever, So
everybody dies in the end.
Yeah, it might be like the Night of Knives or whatever. I'm going to get stabbed to death at the party afterwards.
It's the Ides of March.
Yeah, I mean. Benjamin said that they're going to try real hard to understand where I'm coming from. It's not just like a 12-minute segment and then everybody shakes hands and then it's over. It's like after everyone's 12 minutes, there's a bit of back and forth on the panel and then it goes to the audience for the whole next hour. The audience gets to kind of grill the people on the panel for a whole hour. And then, so it's like, if someone asks me a really direct question, and it's a real challenge for me, Ayers and Lane could potentially bandwagon those people, and they could all just keep kind of just like driving in on that. So, it's like suddenly I feel very vulnerable. Like, wow, I've been saying a lot of stuff about Marxists and about platypoids and such. And now, wait a minute, I'm actually going to be in the hot seat. And so, that's crazy. But Daniel, the question is for people who don't get the medium, but are, staunch materialists, how would you communicate? I genuinely am thinking about this when I go to sleep and when I wake up, like how to communicate the power of the medium.
Oh, what a tremendous question. And the red wedding thing made me laugh. So that was great. Well, so there's a few things. The first thing that sometimes, that is the medium condition right there. If there ever was. Oh my gosh, the condition of the medium is saved. Oh my goodness.
She's just a sweet little girl. Also, Nance is wearing.
So sweet. Just bring. How can they stab you if you bring Charlie? Just bring Charlie. Just bring Charlie to. They're not going to stab you if you're holding Charlie. They would try, and they'd be like, "Oh, the knife. We can't. No, he's blocking. We can't. We'll have to wait." So you'll be fine. Just take Charlie.
I'll bring Charlie. Charlie,
Charlie,
talk to the Marxists for me.
Just bring Charlie. It's like the humans on the panel and be like, you just go, just go from there. I don't have time and energy, so Charlie has. So, it works out. No, it's a tremendous question. Some things. So first off, there always is the question of what is material. And can you it's kind of like when you talk about nature, and Benita Roy makes these points as well on the idea when you say, the human in nature, as if the human isn't part of nature, right? Like the human is an extension of nature, so you can't make these hard distinctions. And likewise, if you say technology versus nature, well, technology is part of nature too, in a way, right? I mean, the conditions of nature generate technology. You don't have these hard lines, even if you have different, you could call emergentisms like Maurowitz will talk about that have different principles. That's fine, but you can't draw these stark distinctions, right? There's a continuum that's going on. So likewise, when we talk about material and the material condition of people, the medium is a material. It is made of, material. It is people's environment, right? And it changes their relation to material, right? What is material to people is experientially different after the printing press than before the printing press, after the internet, et cetera, so forth, right? So likewise, if you don't take seriously the digital or communication, you're saying that you can draw these hard distinctions between digital and meat, between the communication and economics, right? When actually they all, in people's experiences, are tied together. And critically, as we learn from sociology, people's habits and modes and ways of being are all shaped by this world that they're formed in. You can't separate the agent from the world. They are already world, as we learn from Heidegger, and their habits are formed, right? So if you don't take that seriously, you'll be talking about a material condition in which people don't live. That doesn't exist, actually. And perhaps if you liberate people from that material condition, it will seem like a success. But since that material condition is no longer the case, it will be a liberation that liberates no one, because those people were alive, say, in the 1920s, and they're not here now. Furthermore, if the medium does actually change human subjectivity itself, like if it's inseparable from the very ways people are, then to not think the medium is to not think the subject. And the subject, you say, liberate from the material condition, you will perhaps liberate them into something that they will not be able to think. They won't have political capacities, as Studebaker emphasizes, and then they will simply return to the thing that you liberated them from, right? And also, too, if there's this stress, as as Platypus talks about, the left is dead, long live the left, as you were that, and also if there's this key notion that Catrone emphasizes, as I understand it, which is the idea that there was this real freedom that came up in bourgeoisie society, that came up in capital, that became a great unfreedom, right? Like there was this liberation, even is it Professor Vaughan, Dr. Vaughan, I believe, but correct me if I'm incorrect, who talks about the American Revolution as having a real freedom in it, because it becomes based on a philosophical notion that's not based on blood. And it's this idea of people across the ways can talk. The problem is it becomes the unfreedom because people aren't able to sustain it, right? So if there is some sort of event or tendency or probability that keeps occurring where real freedoms become unfreedoms, well, then maybe the problem is the way materiality has been thought at the exclusion of, say, medium conditions, and not taking that seriously, which has been a missing piece of the puzzle for actually cultivating the capacities to keep real liberations liberated, as opposed to falling back or falling apart, right? I do genuinely think that basically the medium condition, architecture and design, are pieces that have not been thought, which is why I like to stress, as we've talked about before, the situation of capital with Marx as it being a conditioning of how people experience and interpret things that makes them toward reality in a certain way that makes them susceptible to commodity forms. And so if you don't work with that, you're going to have real problems. And what I would also say is the following. If one wants to speak of revolution without speaking about the medium condition, I am of the opinion that revolution, what's another meaning of revolution? Going in a circle back to where you started. You won't go anywhere, right? If revolution is actually to be vertical, if it is actually to have some sort of transformation that occurs, then it will have to transform people's habits and capacities. It will have to transform the way by which they coordinate their social lives and their activities and use their time. If you don't do that, then it does not seem plausible to me that people will develop new social and political capacities that won't just end up a repetition of previous, say, liberation projects. You know, Tony at one time talks about Maoism, you know, China as a real communist activity, that Mao actually believed in giving power to the people, and they end up eating themselves, right? They end up like falling apart. Or Studebaker has emphasized we have to regain political capacity. Okay, let's liberate people from economic mediation, but they're not able to handle difference. They're not able to work through the different ways they think things should be, or how the society should be formed. Well, then they'll just kill each other, basically, and then it will seem like a giant mistake to have left the mediation of capital, right? It will seem like a giant mistake to have moved to the human, right? The human is a Lovecraft with the craft in parentheses. The human technology is an extension of that thing that we are, just more on the side of the Lovecraft, right? It is not given. We talk all day about humans as love and all these, but
you mean like the human as a process or art of loving as a way of life. You don't mean H.P. Lovecraft, right? Just want to check.
No, for me, the play is human. It's funny, is I like to think of Lovecraft with humans are the craft with parentheses. Like we decide based on if we handle the capacity, and by love, I have Dante in mind with the beatific vision, who I always like to talk about. The human is that choice, basically. And every time we have released humans to the social without mediation, very often it ends up a Lovecraft where we're destroyed by that, unless you do it on a very small scale with people that are relatively similar, Sarah Gibbons, and that's not an address to the problem of global pluralism, right? That's going to be a certain fragmentation. Decentralization, you could say, and a lot of people are putting their chips in the decentralization bag, and don't get me wrong, there's some issues, there's some goods to be had with that. But decentralization works until people have moral, real disagreements. They think the other side is an atrocity because they're doing slavery or something, and then they go to war, and you centralize again to deal with that. And we talked about this with Studebaker the other day. To just stop some of these thoughts is that what we have seen is humans, when they have real freedoms, tend to go back to an unfreedom. Or they tend to, well, we engage in reductionism to handle one another. You see, this is very important. Reductionism is not a mistake. It's all you can do if you don't have capacities for the fullness of the human being. If it's the Beatrice smile that's too much for me and it's going to reduce me to ass, then I have to reduce human beings. I have to flatten them to not be destroyed for my own safety's sake, as Thomas More says in A Man of All Seasons. Like, you find yourself having to do that. Well, if we don't like flattening, and we don't like reductionism, which then the issue is, as you do that, it creates habits to keep doing that, and it gets stuck, and then you don't even know how to get out of it. If we don't like that, then we have to frickin' develop the capacities to do that. And I see little evidence, in my opinion, I see little evidence that you can enhance those capacities without taking the medium condition seriously. And I see no evidence of being able to realize and certainly spread those capacities without new social coordination. And social coordination is what this is doing. And unless you develop new social coordination, the dominant coordination mechanism will be the economy. It will be capital, and capital will coordinate human relations. And you can talk all day about humans being freed from that or how that's going to get us all killed, but it will still be practically the only alternative people have, and they'll just turn to it and then have their very way of experiencing reality shaped by that, and so prove incapable of the political capacities, again, Studebaker has said, and what is necessary to keep a freedom from becoming an unfreedom. And I see no way to even suggest possibly dealing with that conundrum without thinking the medium condition. Every other, dare I say, revolutionary act will ultimately prove to fall back without that consideration. Those would be some things I would say.
Yeah. So if I were to summarize in a sentence, which I know is a violence, to talk like people who read too much Levinas back in the day, let's see, I'll put it this way. Yeah, so Marxism is a set of tools that constitutes a map of a territory or situation. And that situation, the political economy, which is to say the humans with their time, their energy, their exchange, the whole system that arose off of it was understood both by the people in it at the time during Charles Dickens, as well as since then, through the tools and assumptions of a bookish people who have a certain sense for what it is to be human, that if you're still a bookish person here in the 21st century, it's possible to still kind of see the world that way. But if you're not a bookish person, it might just not work. Now, we are ourselves to some extent bookish people, but we're also constantly trying to break the books against reality. Right? Like that's the scientific attitude, is you try to break the concepts and categories against reality itself. And so what are the realities on the ground in the actual conditions that have changed? Well, we've talked a bit about the medium here. We'll talk a little bit about, for me, I'm going to focus a lot on other things that I talk about, like discursive Taylorism and the gerrymandering of Befindlichkeit. And I'm going to talk about that to an audience of people who have never heard me say anything probably. And it'll be a sort of way of consolidating the last 2.5 years of Theory Underground's life and all of the courses and all of the seminars that we've all been a part of, consolidating all of that into a short little piece, but also really like the last 10 years sort of consolidates here. And so, like I keep saying, no pressure, but this is what I'm waking up and thinking about for sure right now. And it's important to me because the left, though it might be dead, it lives long and well, perfectly fine, alive in the consciousnesses of all of the people who will be present there in Chicago. You're muted, sir. Oh, there you are.
Well, not to jump in, but I think jump in. I guess another thing I would say is Koratani argues that a mistake was seeing the political not as in the base or the motive exchange, but part of the superstructure, that it would have a certain dissolving that would occur, right? That may be occurring also with the medium, where the medium is kind of being placed not in the base, but being seen as more part of a certain superstructure that actually is kind of more accidental, that it is not essential, right? That may be a mistake. And also it's kind of like, it makes me think of this idea of the separation of church and state, like don't bring the church into state, which is all very, very important. But it's actually impossible to separate state and faith. People have to bring their faith into their political activity. They must. It's their basis of activity. Well, so it goes, you can't separate state and medium. You can't not bring your medium to your material. You're going to do it, right? And so if you want to say, talk about the condition that people are in, you must take the digital media seriously. I think also with McLuhan, often, he's called a fascist or whatever. There's a certain idea of that. Well, even if that was the case, it would not follow,
Wait, really?
it would not follow from this. Yeah, people say funny things.
Wait,
But,
really? Okay.
oh yeah. So, but there's, let's say that was even true. Well, the ideas can still very much matter, right? Like it wouldn't follow from that therefore all thought on the medium is wrong, right?
Right.
And that's always a kind of fallacy. There's a certain, I think, purism that also is sort of part of it. And perhaps also, as just a note, there's something about if you take the medium seriously, then you have to think an entirely new cultural strategy, right? If the medium is inconsequential, then if we can just get our guy in power, if we can just change some laws, then everything will be good, right? If we can just stimulate people to see the light. But if actually the medium matters, then you have to say, go to the people. You have to speak to the people. You have to invite them into coordination, and you have to work with them, right? And there may be, in a weird way, a matter where people in defense of the, people who also are defending people, there may be a subconscious association of avoiding means of encountering people because people are hard. And how do they can surprise you, right? And if you take the medium condition seriously, then that can put you in proximity with people that you then have to work with. And that's, we can disavow that. And I guess the other thing that I would say too, you mentioned Heidegger and the idea of finding a better position in the hermeneutic circle. I think the best position is basically the spot where you can be surprised, where something that you can encounter that which was unexpected. Because the thing is, when you're surprised, you can't reduce that to your interpretation. It's immediately in your interpretation, but it's that thing that kind of breaks through your internal consistency, that which you did not see coming, right? Well, basically what you're doing with Theory Underground is using the medium to incorporate the possibility of surprise and encounter and something occurring that cannot be done. Well, basically, any possibility of new political events or the social has always been destroyed by surprise, by the thing occurring that you're not expecting and that you're not prepared for. Well, then you need to train people and habituate people for the surprise, which would necessarily be a medium that is designed to incorporate surprise or to have things not necessarily know what's going to occur. The problem with content creation is it's, designed precisely so a surprise does not occur. You have a certain schedule. You create the content. You get the bugs out of it. You can't have that happen. Well, if the loss of political capacity in the social has been tied to the inability of humans to handle surprise, then a medium condition that doesn't do that will not be part of the address. But then critically, the medium condition, this is my point, the medium condition seems uniquely poised to be able to train people in those possibilities, because you're able to get people out of their immediate geography where they're likely to have fallen into some sort of self-symmetry, being able to work with the time that they do have between dropping off the kids and dinner, which might be 30 minutes, thus increasing the probability that people can actually have these sort of surprises and learn about themselves in the surprise, because you actually find out what kind of person you are when things don't go your way, which if you never find out, which I think connects with the point you were making, you will actually never develop the capacities for the political and social, and thus every event of freedom will fall back into an unfreedom. I don't see any other way to train people in those conditions than with a medium condition like this. And so that's another reason why I think you must take the medium seriously, especially now that it doesn't have to simply be content creation. It can be a coordination of people to run into that of which, in realizing is part of them, they can thus work to enhance, mainly here in this example, the capacity to deal with otherness in a way that you did not pre-plan. And I think if we can't do that, we can't be convivial.
Conviviality, and that's where it ties back to the different kinds of tools and institutions in our lives. And those tools are technologies, but they're also mediums. And so this is what we want to be thinking about. Also, the school as a medium has been a really big factor in our private as well as public conversations over the last couple of weeks. We're going to close this out briefly. Nathan just popped into the chat and said, "Salute, OG." Yes. And Bogdan was talking about Fanon and also necropolitics, and how that might relate, even though it's anti-human. And I said in a side, I said that's peak paranoid sociology right there. Saying that all politics is necropolitics is one of those sort of moves. You know, it's kind of like Levinas. Everything is violence. It's like, I love Levinas, but there is like a way to become like a bad Levinasian where it's like, yes, everything is violence. Language itself is, we don't need to just smash the machines. Smash words, man. You know?
Well,
go off, King.
Like, I hate language. I love words. I think of myself as a writer. I think of myself as one who is good at using words. I hate them. And it's because I hate them, I bend them to my will. It's because I understand that there's a separation between meaning and word. So in a sense, I want to be a little more empathetic to Levinas and say, yes, I understand, but that doesn't mean we shouldn't use it. Just because we are using force and violence, don't moralize and don't shy away from it. And I think Levinas achieves that. But you're right, people can become bad Levinasians and or misread it entirely, and like they do with Bourdieu.
Yeah. And so on this like words thing and how things have changed also, I remember back in like my leftist activist days when people who were a part of BreadTube or LeftTube, and including myself, so we were all part of this, we would address ourselves to the camera like we were speaking to the masses, right? And without a theory of the big other and everything, you don't really realize like how easy it is to psychoanalyze yourself in that context. It's like so embarrassing, right? It's so embarrassing. But it's speaking to the camera like it is the masses, when in reality, you're in your bedroom or in your basement, your mom's basement, perhaps. Not me, never. But you know, you're not probably as independent as you'd like to be. And here you are on camera, and who you're speaking to, some niches within the post-class fractured mass, right? Some disparate, consumer demographics, right? And so while you're doing that address to the masses, but in reality, it's to your Patreon and some random passersby that your Patreon supporters are like, yes, radicalize those normies, do it. While you're doing all of that, you also feel like you're Lenin standing atop the soapbox or hanging off the train, making some kind of a rising or consciousness raising sort of speech, right? But of course, it's mostly preaching to the choir or people who are, as the algorithm has determined, open to and searching for something kind of like this. Right? Shirt Brothers. Exactly. We keep going back to that. It is that. It's setting you up to make Shirt Brothers instead of any sort of real friend or family connections, which is just to say, you find yourself in the same store, and then you're like, look at us. We're in the same store. Best friends. You like what I like? Perfect. Right? And so what I'm trying to get at, though, is Gramsci, in the prison notebooks, Gramsci has this quote where he says, the road to revolution was paved over the course of centuries, maybe he says decades, but I think it was at least a century of leaflets and pamphlets and advanced workers and organizers and professional revolutionaries walking the roads and going into factories and actually meeting real people. And those leaflets and pamphlets might seem a little bit like tweets. And I remember a certain sort of spiraling argument I saw some people engaged in about the status of Twitter at the time. And is Twitter like, pamphlets or leaflets back then? And the person who was saying, yes, it is the same. It's just better. We reach more people, right? A much bigger account than myself. But I like these people enough that I'm not going to bother saying their names because I'd like to rebuild a relationship before talking, before saying their names. But they were just taking it to be like the same thing. right? It's like the same thing. And it's like, is it the same thing, but now we can reach the masses faster was the attitude. And the thing is it wouldn't have worked if it was faster. Because when people put in the effort to come to your locale and meet you in the flesh and actually commune with you, there's something like a proof of concept in motion. There's real people and you get to feel them out. And those people in meeting you and everyone else there local gets to read the room. And of course, we're just building up to that. We're still paving these roads, so to speak. The roads haven't been paved yet because we live on an entirely different planet and we're a new species. And we actually have to take it seriously. Like history ended and now we're in cyber history. And the real question is how do we slow down if everything's accelerating? Because the Nicklandian position is, well, we can't know anything. We can't understand anything. We definitely can't change anything. It's definitely a foregone conclusion because everything's too fast anyway to be able to do anything but sort of, yeah, you'll always be like 20 years behind in interpretation. So give up. And then he takes the side of the machines, basically. And then, of course, left accelerationists usually get like, oh, well, we can strategically slow down in certain ways and speed up in other ways. And that does sound kind of like what I'm saying about harnessing versus countering tendencies. But at the end of the day, one way to slow down is just to actually meet people and get on their wavelength. The dredge, ultimately, is what we're talking about. And the cultivation of, instead of virtual reality, which is where so many people are going, and I've been playing some Horizon on VR on your Oculus Rift, which is sick. It's a great game. It's a very, very, very beautiful game. But no, we're going to do real virtuality. It's much better than virtual reality. Real virtuality is what we're doing with this sort of weird, non-cybernetic, non-dialectical sort of new process of weaving the online into the real world and back and forth, and then finding ways of twisting and breaking things in new ways. All right, closing thoughts, and we'll get on with our night and go hang out with Alex or something.
Well, this has been great. I've really enjoyed it. I think the discussion on the medium condition is huge because I basically am of the opinion that the only way to extend the human being is in the realm of things like architecture, medium, because I ultimately think it's in the realm of geometry, because the problem is the overly algebraic notion of human being that thus logically leads to a certain replacement, because we become the X variable that can be replaced with something else and give the same answer. I think also, just as a note, I think this idea of resisting speed, that's, from the great Paul Virilio. And, that also the great Owen and Agnon does tremendous work with Joshua Hansen on Virilio. I really like it. But basically, what all this means, what if there are things that you cannot accelerate? Like you simply cannot. There's a certain assumption, or could be an assumption in accelerationism, that there is no such thing as a thing that cannot be accelerated and lose itself. Or the things that are accelerated will necessarily eclipse that which cannot be accelerated. Well, obviously a good example, can you accelerate love? Or is there something about love that necessarily has to be worked through a period of time? What about virtue? What about beauty? What about friendship? What about mastery? These are things that really don't seem like you can accelerate. Maybe you can speed up to a certain degree. Maybe there are ways to avoid unnecessary mistakes. Maybe there is some degree of getting to the destination quicker, but it is not a endless acceleration. It is not a accelerate necessarily to infinitum, right? There's a certain point in which you simply cannot speed it up anymore without losing it, right? Well, what if those are the things that, in fact, are the capacities and humanness that keeps freedom from becoming an unfreedom? What if those are the things that actually everything depends on, and that actually the human has a chance if they can stand in and defend? I think there's a very good reason to think that the things that actually are the key to the human are things that, by definition, cannot be accelerated. That, unfortunately, though, accelerationism can get us out of the habits of being able to think. This is why the medium condition is very important, because you literally can forget of these things or simply not see them or not be able to coordinate your life in such a manner that you can honor them and participate in them. But if that was afforded by the medium condition, and if these things are indeed that which no amount of accelerationism can get rid of, then if we can dwell in them in a Heideggerian sense, if we can actually help generate the clearings in which they can come forth and that we can relate to them by, well, then there is no reason to assume that the human must be over and that AI will win in these things by definition because it is faster. What this would mean is that there are things that the game is not over just because things can accelerate, right? There are realities that acceleration does not determine the winner, per se. The one who wins is the one who dwells in them and who can honor them and work with them and tarry with them. And I think those are the most human things. The most human things are that of which are brought out through time and are necessarily slow. Like, again, another example, can I speed up cooking a good meal? I can, but good chefs will tell you that if you speed it up, if you say, oh, okay, so this takes, I got to do that at 350 degrees for 10 minutes. Well, then I'll do 500 degrees for 5 minutes. It changes the flavor. It's not the same. There's a reason there's a certain amount of time that it takes, and you run the risk of destroying the meal if you speed it up. That is precisely the protection of the human possibility, that there are realities like that you can't speed up without changing them. But we as human beings have to believe in those realities. We have to be able to coordinate ourselves to best foster those realities. And we also have to believe in those realities. And if we can do these things, if we can in fact do these things, then the human has a chance. And I think the human does have a chance.
That's the real goal of cyber Ludditism, right?
Yeah, man. I like that. The human has a chance. I agree.
Human has a
Yeah, and then I just say, like, you know, and this is where someone always comes up with this, oh, there's no going back. And I just find it the most flattening, totalizing, weirdly linear thing ever, because some things, of course, can't go back. Like, I don't know, that's, but then other things, it's not a matter of going back. It's just a matter of leaving it alone. And so the reason, the example I keep going back to is like nature. If you stop covering it over with cement, it'll grow. You don't have to do anything. You could maybe tend to it and cultivate it. Maybe you could weed certain things and encourage other things to grow, whatever. But if you just stop paving it, eventually it grows, right? Well, if there are certain things in the human that people are like mourning, oh, people can't focus anymore, for instance. Oh, people can't focus anymore. People can't organize anymore. Well, maybe if we stop paving over them, they'd be able to, right? Like that's an example. Maybe it's not the best example, but it's the one that comes to mind right now. So, yeah.
Well, we don't need to go back. We need to go deep. And when people say, oh, we can't go back, well, the way forward is depth. And so there's no need to go back. There's a need to go deep.
All right, and the only way you can do that, the only way on the entire internet, everybody, the only way that you can go deep, the only way that will genuinely work to go deep, you've guessed it, is to get off of the internet right now, go touch grass, and hang out with your friends. You thought I was going to say subscribe to Theory Underground. No way, guys. All right, everybody, have a good rest of your day. Take care. Peace.
All the best.
We cannot do direct revolution, but the only way to lay the foundation for it is to do what you are doing to move the underground. It's a theoretically correct title.
Theory Underground exists to cultivate the conditions necessary for a working-class intellectual renaissance that goes beyond old political categories or other identitarian niches. At TU, autodidact workers with earbuds and professionals who see no future in existing institutions or movements are able to challenge their doxa and develop an understanding of the situation we are in.
If you subscribe at theoryunderground.com, you'll get access to a package of courses, including my Intro to Fault Line Theory, which includes Intro to Nick Land and Intro to Slavoj Žižek. These courses are being woven with the 3 courses that take place on a month-to-month basis, spread out throughout the year of 2025. Those courses are 12 Core Concepts and the Fundamental Problems with the Situation Today with social theorist David McKerracher, 12 Essential Political Thinkers with political theorist Benjamin Studebaker, and The Philosophy of Nature with philosopher Nina Power.
The way these all get woven together at a deeper and more meta level is through the ongoing research seminars led by David McKerracher, Benjamin Studebaker, and Michael Downs, where they engage with one another's work by sharing developments from their own perspectives, theory, and research.
If you subscribe at higher levels and support our work, we'll support your development with bespoke teaching. Alone and unaided, we struggle to grasp our situation in its fullness and formulate a meaningful response. By working together and pooling our energies, we can do better. Join us at theoryunderground.com/subscribe.
There'll be 2 kinds of people in 10 years. Those who said, I knew all along Theory Underground was going to make this huge difference. Those are the people that are like Nance, who were on the sidelines at one point and then said, nah, I'm going to get in. I'm going to roll up my sleeves and I'm going to go hard. And then there's another kind of person, a person who waits in the wings, collects receipts, and who will say in 10 years, oh yeah, I was there. I saw that happen. And then they'll gossip monger. Listen, if you want to get involved, get involved. But if you're going to sit there in the bleachers, well, here's some popcorn. I hope you have fun.
We cannot do direct revolution, but the only way to lay the foundation for it is to do what you are doing to move the underground. It's a theoretically correct title.
Theory Underground exists to cultivate the conditions necessary for a working class intellectual renaissance that goes beyond old political categories or other identitarian niches. At TU, autodidact workers with earbuds and professionals who see no future in existing institutions or movements are able to challenge their doxa and develop an understanding of the situation we are in.
If you subscribe at theoryunderground.com, you'll get access to a package of courses, including my Intro to Fault Line Theory, which includes Intro to Nick Land and Intro to Slavoj Žižek. These courses are being woven with the 3 courses that take place on a month-to-month basis, spread out throughout the year of 2025. Those courses are 12 Core Concepts and the Fundamental Problems with the Situation Today with social theorist David McKerracher, 12 Essential Political Thinkers with political theorist Benjamin Studebaker, and The Philosophy of Nature with philosopher Nina Power.
The way these all get woven together at a deeper and more meta level is through the ongoing research seminars led by David McKerracher, Benjamin Studebaker, and Michael Downs, where they engage with one another's work by sharing developments from their own perspectives, theory, and research.
If you subscribe at higher levels and support our work, we'll support your development with bespoke teaching. Alone and unaided, we struggle to grasp our situation in its fullness and formulate a meaningful response. By working together and pooling our energies, we can do better. Join us at theoryunderground.com/subscribe.
There'll be 2 kinds of people in 10 years. Those who said, I knew all along Theory Underground was going to make this huge difference. Those are the people that are like Nance, who were on the sidelines at one point and then said, nah, I'm going to get in. I'm going to roll up my sleeves and I'm going to go hard. And then there's another kind of person, a person who waits in the wings, collects receipts, and who will say in 10 years, oh yeah, I was there. I saw that happen. And then they'll gossip monger. Listen, if you want to get involved, get involved. But if you're going to sit there in the bleachers, well, here's some popcorn. I hope you have fun.
We cannot do direct revolution, but the only way to lay the foundation for it is to do what you are doing to move the underground. It's a theoretically correct title.
Theory Underground exists to cultivate the conditions necessary for a working class intellectual renaissance that goes beyond old political categories or other identitarian niches. At TU, autodidact workers with earbuds and professionals who see no future in existing institutions or movements are able to challenge their doxa and develop an understanding of the situation we are in.
If you subscribe at theoryunderground.com, you'll get access to a package of